Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When I saw the prequels for the first time as a kid, all the more subtle aspects of the story, like Anakin's hatred for sand, went over my head, as did the commentary about the Jedi. As a kid, I thought the Jedi were heroes, and in many ways, as individuals they were, but there were larger structural issues and power dynamics at play with the Jedi Order that I would only begin to understand as an older fan, and of course, when I became an avid viewer of Generation Tech. The Clone Wars TV show also did an excellent job at exploring the concepts that were introduced in the prequels, and in the latter seasons, especially with arcs like the trial of Ahsoka Tano, we really begin to see the cracks emerge in the Jedi Order's moral high ground. So the Acolyte starts off relatively unsympathetic to the Jedi Order, which I really like. Spoiler alert, there are going to be spoilers in this video from the first two episodes of The Acolyte. In the first sequence, we see the scene from the point of view of the assassin May, who sets off to kill Carrie-Anne Moss's character, aka Jedi Master Indara. Although Master Indara ultimately dies, a hero trying to save another life, I feel like the reason she does this is because she's kind of programmed to do this and slightly arrogant, like a lot of Jedi were during this time period, which May perfectly exploits here. I mean, Jedi Master Indara saves that guy at the end, but she also lets like 10 guys get their heads bashed in by May before she actually engages and fights her. There's just something also very cold and aloof about her presence. Also, her holding court in the local cantina like some local fixer or worse, crime boss surrounded by muscle is a problem. Now, I don't doubt that Master Indara's presence on this planet is probably a net positive. I mean, no security is always worse than some security, right? But knowing what we know about the Jedi and what happens when they get involved in decision making or politics, this is worrying. It's not because the Jedi are inherently evil or something crazy like that. It's just that people perceive the Jedi as gods and super beings, and therefore the Jedi tend to not be challenged much. And I don't care how righteous of a person you are, if you find yourself in a position of power and you're not being challenged, there are no checks and balances to your power, you will end up being shittier at your job. Checks and balances are extremely important at every level of society, down to the individual, and placing the Jedi in godlike positions solely based on their powers in the Force and their organization's stellar image is again very problematic. But of course, the Republic being demilitarized probably doesn't have much of a choice here. If anything, they've grown reliant and dependent on these holy monks in the last few centuries of peace. A good example of this is take a look at May when she first arrives on Ueda. Listen to how she phrases her question to this random person she tries to get information from.
Where's your Jedi?
Where's your Jedi implies that every town has a Jedi. This means that there could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jedi deployed all across the galaxy in settlements just like this. We also learned that May's homeworld of Brendok had 4 Jedi stationed on that planet, and now she wants to kill them all, meaning the Jedi weren't always doing a good job as peacekeepers. And so while the Empire couldn't realistically build enough Star Destroyers to have one stationed on every one of their planets and holdings, but the Jedi in theory could have enough members to do exactly that, which kind of shows us just how dependent the entire galaxy has become on Jedi peacekeepers. I mean, if you take a look at how Yord Fandar just strolls onto that Trade Federation ship like he owns the goddamn thing.
Why would we have mechanics here? The Republic has legislated that only droids may perform outer ship repair.
Sublevel, bunk 23.
Bro just violated that Neimoidian's brain like he was checking for license and registration. I mean, I really like Yord. I like characters like this. I think he's hilarious. I think he's gonna get a lot of Jedi killed because of his lack of, brain. Also, there are a lot of people criticizing Charlie Bennett. I think that's his name. Charlie Barnett. That's the actor who's portraying Yord. He said in a few interviews that Anakin destroyed the Death Star, and people are really pissed off about this. But guys, I almost call the Neimoidians Trandoshans because, I haven't slept in a long time. And you know what? Even if Barnett's not a real Star Wars fan, I think most of the actors and actresses who claim to be Star Wars fans aren't actually real Star Wars fans, or at least really, crazy Star Wars fans like I am, And I think, this is just a part of Disney's PR thing to get these interviews. But I also have to say, does it really matter if you're a Star Wars fan when you get casted to be in these movies? I don't think so. I mean, being a Star Wars fan and being an actor are completely different things. I mean, Tony Gilroy famously said he wasn't a fan of Star Wars, and look at what he made. A complete masterpiece. The truth is, when you love something a bit too much, you tend to squeeze the life out of it. I think that's one of the criticisms that Dave Filoni fairly gets. Anyway, back to the Jedi's police brutality. At this point in time, the Trade Federation was still a relatively benign organization. You know, this was 100 years before the Phantom Menace. Newt Gunray and the Sith hadn't assassinated the entire board and, you know, made that hostile takeover of the company. I mean, Newt Gunray's probably not even alive at this point. The Trade Federation wasn't any more sketchy than your usual logistics company when it comes to safety and maintenance, but they definitely weren't an evil organization like the Trade Federation. And so Yord is completely out of line for just like, you know, Jedi mind controlling this dude. I mean, I love it. I love it. It's kind of unhinged. The Jedi think this is okay. I also really like the small detail that it's illegal for human mechanics or mechnics to do exterior ship work. Yeah, someone called OSHA on OSHA. This line of work is apparently reserved for astromechs only, like R2-D2 in Phantom Menace when he first proves his worth. Now, some of you might be crying out, unnecessary bureaucracy and regulation are what killed the Republic, and you know, I might agree a little bit on that actually. But I see this as a pretty cool story detail that really fits with the High Republic period. I mean, usually when your society takes care of the basics, you know, like food, water, Ewok cheeks, they start regulating kind of very arbitrary things, I guess. I mean, yeah, maybe people occasionally die from working on the outside of starships, but is it a major problem holding society back, like, you know, the lack of clean water? Probably not. You know, as an American, as someone from New Jersey specifically, I can see a lot of laws in my state that basically boil down to this is why we can't have nice things. And this is why, even though I was born and raised in a developed country, I really love going to the so-called third world. Why do I do that? Well, for instance, in Cambodia, you can literally pay the military about $200 to $300 to fire an RPG. You used to also be able to buy a cow and then fire the RPG at the cow, which is probably the most American thing I've ever heard of, but ironically, you probably wouldn't be able to do that in America easily or legally. But nor would you want to, because the reality is a lot of these lesser developed countries are full of people who simply do not give a fuck about the same things as we do. Simply put, you know, most Americans like me, we've simply grown too soft over the years. Our excessive amounts of freedom and air conditioning and SUVs have just made us too weak to survive in countries like that. Anyway, the High Republic is a pretty enlightened society, and so you're going to see a lot of nonsense regulations like this. And when your so-called peacekeepers have to enforce these kind of nonsense regulations on the reg, well, that makes them more unprepared for the actual threats that they have to face. That's why in a lot of major cities in the US, you have like traffic enforcement departments that specifically handle, you know, parking violations, for instance. This is so that the police won't be too loaded down with just too much busy work. Although the lack of, you know, ample social services in America usually means cops are basically doing everything anyway, which is definitely not good for them. But yeah, there are some troubling signs here with the Jedi. They are definitely being spread way too thin on the ground. Now let's take a look at the leadership of the High Republic Jedi. We have Vernestra Rwoh. I know a lot of High Republic fans probably have an issue with how she's being portrayed here, especially because she was kind of a child prodigy and a heroic individual when she was younger. She took part in some major battles against the Nile and the terrifying Drengir. But all I have to say about that is, you know, being a good worker does not necessarily mean you will transition into being a good manager. Just like being a good Jedi Knight or Jedi Master doesn't mean you'll transfer into becoming a great Grandmaster or leader of the Jedi Order. Take Qui-Gon Jinn, for instance. He's one of my favorite Jedi in the Order, and he ultimately saves the Jedi because of his, I guess, out-of-the-box thinking, but I don't think he would have been a good Grandmaster at all. He was just too focused on esoteric things to actually manage and run things. And more importantly, the Jedi were kind of screwed already during his time period, and he would have had to change his worldviews drastically to fit into that position. Which I'm guessing is exactly what Vernestra Rwoh did here. I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like the real heroes, the real unsung heroes, are actually the people who step into these management or government positions that are, you know, objectively just terrible. And a lot of these people have to sacrifice their own values and ethics in order to join these slightly corrupt and shitty organizations. And they do this because they accept the fact that it's better to be in the system, be a part of the system, and try to change it from within, rather than to tear everything down, because usually that just gets more people hurt. You know, being against something is fun, but to actually try to change things, to do something constructive, I think there's something really noble about that. But yeah, Vanessa Rowe has clearly been changed by her station. So much so that when Master Andara gets murdered, instead of worrying about the death of a colleague and making sure she gets a proper funeral and respect, she immediately begins doing damage control like some blood-sucking corpo.
If it were to become public that a former Jedi killed one of our own,
Our political enemies could use it against us.
discretion is important. Our justice swift, an example made.
I love how she ends that conversation speaking like Yoda. But yeah, Roe has clearly been corrupted by her station, and I, again, can't blame her. She's sacrificed so much for the Jedi. She knows how much good the Jedi can do, and she continues to fight for that kind of picture of what she sees the Jedi as. But now, instead of being on the battlefield and killing sentient hive mind plants, which in hindsight is probably a lot easier than what she has to deal with now, she has to now focus on fending off the political opponents of the Jedi in the Senate. That probably just means like Wilhuff Tarkin's great granduncle, Bo Tarkin, who also likes shirtless knife fights and sending his offspring into wildlife preserves full of carnivores. What a family. Anyway, Grandmaster Rowe, I can tell you, is already too much over her head. And to High Republic fans who loved her character as well, you either die a hero or you live to see yourself become the villain. The truth is, it's very hard to create a large organization that will have a solution for every member that passes through it. And that's just the chaos of sentient beings. And so the Jedi system, much like the public education system in most countries, is designed as a solution for the masses. It's going to keep most of the Force sensitives in check and prevent them from using the Force to rob people and eat babies. But there are going to be problems, especially when there's a lack of checks and balances. Which, as I'm getting older, I realize is probably the closest thing we'll get to a perfect solution for most of society's problems. There's always going to be chaos in the galaxy. It's just natural. The sooner you accept this, the happier and wiser you'll become. The people you have to really worry about are the ones who are trying to create utopia or promise they have the answers to everything. But yeah, the Jedi Order is not in trouble because of individuals like Grandmaster Rowe. She's actually trying her best to save the Jedi Order. It's the system itself. It's the dogmatic culture, and more importantly, the centuries of peace and lack of conflict. There's this ancient saying that conflict breeds strong men, and strong men put an end to conflict, which in turn breeds man-children who become YouTube commentators and DJs. Anyway, when we take a look at younger Jedi in the Order like Yord Fandara and Jeki Lone, I'm filled with a mixture of hope and also fear. This is usually how I feel when I look at the younger generation. Both Yord and Jeki are definitely nice kids, but they both are painfully lacking when it comes to actual real-life experience. I mean, there's that scene where Jeki calls out Master Soul for having a hologram of Osha.
Why do you keep old hollows of your former Padawan? This pastime encourages sentimentality and nostalgia, and both of these emotions can lead...
This is actually kind of cute and horrifying at the same time. I mean, she's really dogmatic about the Jedi Code here. This is what happens when you teach children something and drill it into their heads, but they haven't actually experienced themselves the thing that they're becoming super extreme about. I mean, during the Cultural Revolution in China, unfortunately, there are a lot of children who ratted out their own parents for being, enemies of the revolution, and, that ended with some really horrific and tragic consequences for these families. And Jeki Lone, she's no different. I mean, how can she know the pain of losing an apprentice? How can she understand the connection between a Jedi Master and their apprentice? Probably the closest thing a Jedi can have to a normal parent-child relationship. She just is brainwashed into thinking having emotions will always lead to the dark side. Luckily, Jeki has a really awesome Jedi Master who not only answers this question in a really smart way, but also redirects her attention in another direction, because she clearly doesn't have the life experience to understand his point of view.
Our memories are lessons. If we don't meditate on the past,
We're doomed to repeat it.
Notice how Jeki smiles when her master confirms that he's not an emotional Sith Lord. It's again very endearing and cute. Because there's another layer to this. Jeki might not understand what it feels like to have an apprentice you have to take care of and love, but she does know what it feels like to have such a loving and caring Jedi Master like Master Soul, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little jealousy inside of her when she saw Master Soul with that hologram of his old Padawan. The sad thing is both Master and her apprentice have to dance around this issue of emotions and attachment when they both have pretty natural and healthy emotions, and both are obviously very capable of handling and discussing these emotions. I don't care how stoic you are, people need hugs, so they don't turn bitter and hateful. I mean, Yord Farden, who would have also ran into Count Dooku's lightning head first if he were in Anakin's position, also has like that same goodness in him that I see in Jackie. And this can only really happen when you have a really strong moral center and you haven't seen too much crazy shit that will, shake your belief in humanity. But yeah, this is my initial assessment of the Jedi Order. While I'm still on the fence about how good this Acolyte show is, I do know I'm going to love the portrayal of the Jedi Order in the show. I can already see the subtle nudges and details. I mean, they really thought this out well. And I've been waiting for this type of commentary about the Jedi Order for a pretty long time. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our content. I got a lot of things to say about the Acolyte. And a lot of this is not because it's like my favorite show or anything, but because we are in a new era. We're in the High Republic. We're in 100 years before the prequels, and a lot of important things are happening to set the Jedi up for their terrible fall.